Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about ableism, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of the article that you were assigned, Seeing the Disabled by Thomson. So I want to define ableism to begin just broadly as this notion that the world is designed around a certain body type. And you can think of stairs as maybe a good example of this. Stairs are something that if you use them and you're able to use them, you seldom think twice about them existing. But the fact that when humans looked at a structure and asked themselves, how should we get into this structure? The thing that crossed their mind was use your legs to walk up steps. It's clear that they weren't in any way considering the experiences of people that don't have the ability to use their legs in a way that would allow them to walk up steps. So in short, what this article is doing is showing the ways that society designs rules and expectations and structures like the staircase that only allow access to a certain group of people who are what we would call able-bodied, and then we label people that cannot access those places, people that cannot navigate those spaces, as disabled. The term disabled is only applicable once humans have gone about building a structure that does not allow certain people access. That's the bottom line when we're talking about disability this week. So I want to bring back to mind Oscar Wilde and Plato's dance of life and art, because that's really where we're going to end up this week, is with what happens as we view these images of disability and as we consider what's going on in our cultural representations of disability. So to back up a little bit and remind us what we've already talked about in previous weeks, Thomson goes back into this idea that photographs are always contextual. They always contain messages beyond the objective thing that is being pictured. So there's two things to remember here. Not only are they contextual, and they always communicate more than what is actually on the image, and you can see some examples here, the soldier with a peace sign and the tank being pushed in the water. They communicate more than what you're actually seeing, but they're also sneaky. They don't announce, if they're done correctly, that they're trying to communicate this subtextual message. Rather, they seem to just appear as a regular old photo that somebody snapped. And this is very vital to what Thomson is talking about this week. So I want to dump a little more Michel Foucault on y'all. I know he's not assigned at all this semester, but time and again we're coming back to him. Michel Foucault was time and again looking at the process of segmentation and fragmentation, and he noticed that with the human body, which is really one piece of a larger whole in the world around it, that humans had started long ago to segment the pieces of it, and we had started to segment the senses. And instead of taking our experience as a whole, where memories interact with taste, maybe interacting with the fact that I'm hungry at the moment, also interacting with sight and sound to form one concrete structure and event, he noticed that in what he called modernity, humans had begun to segment the senses, and that in so doing, we had valued visual over all the other senses. Now, this is important because we're talking about photographs this week. So when we think of ocular-centric ideology, we can realize that when we see things, we tend to give them more credence and weight than when we hear things or when we smell things or when we interact with the world in different ways. Now, one of the main things that Thomson is hitting at is that photos evoke the familiar by making it strange, meaning that as humans, we don't want to look at ourselves in a mirror literally, but we do want to know what we are looking at. And the more that a photo manages to capture this duality, this I know what that is and yet what is going on here that happens in the brain, the more it will draw in viewers because it gives us something to do as humans. And in front of you, you can see the example I've selected of the blue bear from the convention center in downtown, upended and placed in a mountain setting. If you've lived in Denver, you've seen it, and yet something very different is going on. Now, I want to get to the root of what we're talking about in the article, because what Thomson is getting at is that with most things that we're not sure about, when this process of strange and familiar shows up, we just stare at it. We get a really good look. We want to gawk at it or stare at it. But with disability, we have been taught in most cultures that it is impolite to stare at the disabled. So enter the photograph. When we have a photograph, the whole purpose of the photograph is to be stared at, is to be looked at. And there's no one to judge you because the photo isn't going to speak back. It doesn't know you're staring at it. So what Thomson begins with is this outline of the four main types. Make sure you go into the readings and get a good idea of what each one of these represents. I have included some pictures because the photographs in the PDF were rough, but make sure you understand these before you take the quiz. These aren't important except to recognize that typically one of these is selected by photographers or publicists before they publish to frame the photograph if they are going to show disability, and almost all images of disability fall under one of these categories. I'll welcome you to come back and read back through this text-heavy source. I won't read it line by line. However, where we're headed is that the penalty, the cost of having this idea of disability where we're not allowed to stare, we're not supposed to stare, and yet we really want to stare because we've designed ourselves as ocular-centric cultural creatures, has forced us to the photograph as a medium for understanding disability. And much like anything that we don't experience except for an image and in movie and in the radio and in third hand, we are resigned to accept whatever we get from those photographs and those images because we are always going to engage more with them. So once we understand that all photographs are in fact communicating something contextually, this becomes very important. Those messages often become part and parcel of all that we know about a particular disabled identity.